a production of South Carolina ETV.
Hello from Hartsville, I'm Patty Just. On this program, we're featuring author, poet, and lecturer Elizabeth Boatwright Coker. Ms. Coker is the author of 9 novels. The 3 that we're going to talk about on this program are Daughter of Strangers, her first book, published in 1950, then La Belle, 1959, and Blood Red Roses in 1977. She was born in Darlington in 1908 and graduated from Converse College. She's the recipient of many literary prizes. She's also been recognized in Who's Who in America and in the world. In 1992, she was inducted into the South Carolina Hall of Fame for her writing and for her many contributions to the state. Ms. Coker, it's an honor to have you on our program.
I love being here. It's wonderful.
You're a person who's known that she wanted to be a writer since age 6, growing up in Darlington.
Oh, I wanted to be a writer before then. I wanted to be a writer before I could write. First poem I ever wrote was at a wedding. And as the bride walked in, I stood up and sang, lady fair, you have moonbeams in your hair."
Impressive. Then you went on to win a number of prizes in high school, and that prompted you even more to be a writer.
It did, but I've always loved stories, and I've always loved telling stories and hearing stories, and once I learned to write and hold a pencil in my hand that was just wonderful. It was like a magic wand. I've always written. I loved it.
Did your family encourage that?
Oh yes, they always encouraged it. All my family always gave me books to read. My grandmother, who lived in Charleston as a girl before the Civil War and then married and went to the upcountry, wrote for the newspapers her upcountry life all through the war between the states, and we've been writers all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you went on to college and were very active in writing then. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I was editor of The Concept, and at that time, The Concept won all the prizes of the colleges, and I won the Carroll Prize and the Skylark Prize of the Charleston Poetry Society, and well, I just wrote and won prizes.
And you almost went into the newspaper business.
When I graduated from Converse, all of us in those days went to New York to work. Everybody went. And you either worked at Childs or at Saks Fifth Avenue, but I wanted to work at the New York Times, so I went and took my brochure and told how I must have a job at the Times, and they read my qualifications, and then they listened to me, and then they laughed, and they said, why don't you go and get a model's job? But we'll keep your brochure. Well, they did, and this was in 1929. And I worked as a model all summer long, and then came autumn, and then came the stock market crash. And on the middle of October, I got 2 letters one day, and one was from the New York Times saying they had reconsidered, and they'd read my brochure again, and they thought they had just the job for me to come in for an interview. I also got a letter from my father, who was president of the Carolina National Bank in Darlington, saying his bank had failed, and would I come home? So you can guess what I did. I came home, and I married James Coker in 1930. His father died in 1931, and he was made president of Sunoco when he was 27, and I was 22. So I had to stop writing for a while.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever wonder how life might have been different had you stayed in New York and gone to work with the newspaper?
Oh, I knew it would have been different, but I knew what to do.
Well, your husband encouraged your writing too,
Oh,
even though you had to.
He loved it, and he loved to come home. What have you done today?
You called yourself in those early days a closet writer because you didn't stop writing even though you had a family.
Well, I will say this. I did not bring my writing into the living room or into the library. I kept it very much off key, and my children grew up, and I know my little boy, when Daughter of Strangers came out in 1953, I think he was 7 then. He said, "My mother wrote a book last night." I kept it quiet.
Well, how long did it take you to write that very successful first novel of yours?
That I wrote as a short story first, and then I went to Middlebury to the writers' conference that they had there at Bread Loaf, and Robert Frost read it, and he said, "This is too good for a short story. I want you to make it into a novel." And that was back in 1930, that was 38, 39. And then I came home and had another baby. And then came World War II. So I did not finish it until 1948.
Speaking of World War II, you always said that if you hadn't been a writer, you would have been a doctor.
Oh, I would have loved being a doctor. I worked in the hospitals all during World War II, and I found I just was crazy about everybody I nursed, and I loved it, and I found I had the gift of touch. And they put me to quiet people who had been operated on and had ether, because in those days they didn't have recovery rooms, and all these fancy drugs. So I found that I could quiet people, and I loved it.
Good talent.
Yeah.
But back to Daughter of Strangers, it was published on your 20th wedding anniversary.
It was, and the interesting thing, it was, I was at a meeting with Jim at the National Association of Manufacturers at the Homestead in Hot Springs, Virginia, and Dutton sent 100 copies of the book there with one of their people, and all 100 sold within the first hour. But it was at a National Association of Manufacturers and I was just thrilled, and they were thrilled, and that took it all over the country, you see. And then when I came home, Coker College had a literary festival in those days. It was very interesting. And James Michener was to be the speaker that year. This was October of 1950. South Pacific had just come out. So I had never made a speech in my life, and James Michener introduced me with my first speech. And it was just, I look back at a picture of that time, and it just seemed so wonderful. Imagine being introduced by James Michener.
The book was such a success. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 months.
At least, if not longer.
Really?
And really, and strangely, it was the biggest bestseller of the English publication that's ever been in South Africa. Isn't that interesting?
It is. Can you tell me the story? What's the plot of Daughter of Strangers?
Well, I'd always been interested in, I'd been brought up by a black lady who took care of me, and I'd always been interested in how I would feel if I were black. So there'd been many stories about people changing from black to white, but nobody had ever done a story about how it would feel to change from being white to being black. And so that was the subject of the short story that Robert Frost read and was so impressed with. And that was how I came to write it, I guess. I was written it anyway, but that's how. Yeah, I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote in college called A Summer Day.
All right.
I'm of the South, black. I'm bent from bearing stovewood on my back. My head is trained to balance baskets far, filled with raw shrimp, red crabs, a jade bar of asparagus resting on feathery parsley. My lips are thick and shrilly croon my wares through the cobbled streets till noon with its heat drives me to a palmetto and sleep on the cool green grass of some white man's place, deep cloistered in the shadows of gray moss. Then afternoon and the turning tide bring fish that my black children catch, while the swish of gold marsh grass sings a breeze too light to blur soft love songs that come with the night.
Nice poem. Obviously, you've been very keenly interested in the South's history.
Oh, I've always loved history, especially the South's history, better than anything. And in Daughter of Strangers, I use a lot of Gullah. And now you know that they went through a period where Gullah was off the scene. But Gullah is the deepest link between the black African-American heritage and then Native Africa and America. And now there's a great fashion to bring Gullah back. But it made a big difference when Daughter of Strangers was being bid for all over Europe. How can we translate Gullah? Well, now, it was re-brought out 4 years ago in Israel, and I've always wanted to read how they translated Gullah into Israel. Now, I'll read you a little bit, and I'm going to read some of it in Gullah.
All right, good.
If my glasses work. Let's go and break the filly, Inigo shouted. He's the hero. And since everybody had had more than enough to eat and drink, they all bowed low and to the Tafra, who is the mistress of the plantation, and Emily, and even the ladies hurried away. Yeah, Cuffy, it wasn't cold outside. They made their way across the lawn to the east field where the slaves were gathered. Among the slaves were jockeys from other plantations who had gotten permits to spend Christmas afternoon at Normandy. Yellow Pompey, Henry Singleton's prize jockey, was on the front lawn, and all the slaves were in great spirits and making much conversation about Cuffy. He was going to ride the filly. What's it in the Old Bailey? Mom gonna say, get up, mule, and beat mule with stick. Mule gonna turn around and say, what for you to beat me for? And she gonna kick up them big red heels, and Cuffy gonna be down in the dirt on his flat nose, laughed Yellow Pompey, who was Cuffy's greatest rival on the racetrack. Hush your mouth, said Big Jake. You must ain't never see Cuffy ride him, Auntie. How about you riding she and he place? A pleased laugh followed this, and then he go bellered. Everybody shut up. Everybody shut up. Yeah, amen, Massa. Yassa, Massa. That's right, Massa. You tell him, Massa. And so that started the race. And at the end of the race, Charlotte, who is the heroine, was so jealous that she didn't know what to do, because Inigo, she was in love with Inigo. She is my heroine. And she was a white girl and thought until she was about 15. And then her father died and left so many debts, and it was discovered that she had black blood. So she was sold into slavery and this was it. But the master of the plantation was in love with her, and he loved her. And then when everybody was making so much to do over the horse, Charlotte threw some dirt in the horse's face. Which horse? She screamed wildly. And Fancy jumped as though she had been shot, plunging into the crowd. And then Inigo is so infuriated with her that he strikes her with his riding crop. Well, that's it. But it's very sad. And that night he comes when she's in the sick house from the blow. Inigo stared at the shimmer of Charlotte lying on coarse gray sheets under a rough blanket, and never had she looked more beautiful to him, never more completely desirable. He bent and kissed her burning lips, and she kissed him back, even though she could not force a word or thought coherently from either her brain or her heart. Hagar got up from her chair in a dark corner, and Inigo whispered quickly in Charlotte's ear, "I'm going to take you west with me the day after New Year's. Get strong and love me, Charlotte. Please love me." Charlotte tried to nod her heavy head, but she could not find the will to make it work. "What Yenna wants, Mus' Inigo. Charlotte's so full of cocaine, she easy now. Yenna get on back to the big house where Yenna belongs and quit disturbing this poor child." Inigo did not care to brave Hagar's wrath. He knew that she was definitely in league with the devil and could cast the most potent spells in the parish. So he fixed his fingers in the shape of horns to preventing her putting plat eye on him as he went quickly away, wondering just when he had made up his mind to take Charlotte west and marry her, to tell her that he loved her. When had he decided? He knew. He had decided the very day she arrived at Normandy and laughed up at him, her wonderful eyes filled with admiration of him. Now, in this book, aside from the Gullah, I also end each chapter with a spiritual that describes what happened in that. So it's really historic.
Such a powerful and moving story. Another one that I'd like to talk about is La Belle, and that's based on the notorious Belle Marie Boozer, who rode away with Sherman's army.
Well, she was the most beautiful girl that ever grew up in Columbia, and she rode away, and nobody ever really knew what happened to her. There was a coffee club in Columbia at that time, and if you remember Mr. Gitman's bookstore, it was very famous, and old Mr. Gitman was very fascinated with Mary Boozer. He's the one put me on to her. But a group of men used to meet there, and they used to talk about, they had a club, the coffee club, as I said. One was the president of the University of South Carolina, one was Dr. Babcock, who was head of the state hospital, Yates Snowden, the great history professor, Ambrose Hampton, and people like that. And he persuaded me to, Julian Bullock was also very interested, and Tom Pope, you know, the judge from Newberry, and they all got together and they persuaded me to write a story about it. So we all began to hunt for things about Mary Boozer. She left Columbia with her mother and Sherman's army because her mother had gotten into trouble, and they went to New York. She married a great socialite in New York, and she ended up marrying, when her New York husband died, she married this very French Count Portalis. Well, then she disappeared, and when she died, her obituary in the Augusta paper said she had been beheaded by the Mikado of Japan. And there was another legend that said that she had been, her heel strings had been cut by the Shah of Iran, and she had to be carried around on a beautiful silver cushion, silver-colored cushion, and she grew enormously fat, and it took 4 men to lift her. Well, those were cruel stories. And Samuel Gilliard's story, Stoney from Charleston, after the book, before the book came out, it was just before it was published, I was working at the New York Public Library and looking up the Countess Portalis. And then the head of the New York Public Library, his name was Mr. Cam, C-A-M. He said, "I think you've been going wrong because once she married Count Portalis, the spelling of her name would be B-O-O-S-I-E-R. Let's look her up." So he did, and discovered that she had been one of the great ladies. And Maurice Baring wrote a book called The Puppet Show of Memory in 1922. And Samuel Gilliard Stoney, he found this portion of Mary in that and sent it to me. Shall I read it? All of it or just part
Just a
of it?
tiny portion.
I got to know many French people, and some of those who had been famous in the days of the Second Empire. Madame de Portalis was one of them. Madame de Portalis had gray hair, but time, which had taken away much from her and stamped her with his pitiless seal, had not taken and was destined never to take away the undefinable authority that alone great beauty possesses and never loses, nor her radiant smile, which would suddenly look young.
Oh, it's another terrific story based on history. Blood Red Roses was one written about two strong characters, Beau and Angelique, down at St. Helens Island, Hilton Head Island.
Hilton Head,
Right.
yes. I spent so much of my childhood in Bluffton with my Aunt Ethel, and Hilton Head was, at that time, there were no, this was back in 1912, 15, 16, there were no houses there because the Yankees had occupied it during the Civil War, and everybody had run away to Beaufort, the big, but at one time it was the biggest cotton plantation area in the world, and the richest, it was the richest parish in South Carolina. Richest parish in South Carolina, one of the richest in the United States. But Angelica was left behind when the Yankees occupied the, you know, the island. She was the only one that was left behind. And so I tell about her living there under the Yankee occupation, you see. And then at the end, the Beau comes home and, stifling a young button, says, "Hasn't Bubba told you that a lot of Confederates are going to Brazil if the Yankees win the war? Israel made me bring the sack of cottonseed lying hid in your closet instead of the grandfather in the gold coat. Israel said these fine seeds would start us getting so rich after the war that I can have my picture painted on a whole gold suit. Little Edward won't even know the difference. There are thousands of yellow butterflies in Brazil. We can pretend some of them flew ahead of us from the island to make us feel at home there for the rest of our lives. Angelica, you aren't listening, and your eyes are looking way, way off. Why? Ah, dear Button, because I hear only the thunder of hoofs and see nothing but the sun god color of Beau's flying hair as he comes galloping across the fields to me on the blue-eyed silver horse." And so then the sequel to this is The Grasshopper King, and I take them, they don't get to Brazil, they get as far as Mexico. So it's a story of Maximilian.
It's a good read. Last year, you were inducted into the South Carolina Hall of Fame, which I said at the top of the show. How did you feel about that honor?
I just loved it. I really did. I don't think anything, I just was so relaxed. I never have enjoyed anything as much. And the morning, the ceremony was at 11, but at 9:30, I met with 1,000 teenagers from O'Ree County, and they were sitting all, you know, around the back of the huge convention hall. And it was just, I think it was that I enjoyed more than anything.
Well, it was a great day for you. We have a little bit of the videotape from your acceptance speech. We'll take a look at it.
It has often been difficult for me to break away from the realities around me in order to write, but I have, and that is why I have managed to be 3 different me's: corporate wife, doting mother, closet writer. I believe in the blessed balm of laughter. Even laughing in the dark is a more melodious sound to our Creator than whimpering over our fears and incapacities. By developing an innate sense of humor, I have gone smoothly through many situations that would have undone me had I tried to kick them over with criticism and caustic comments. For if we place the proper value on laughter, we learn to believe in tolerance, which in the end is my strongest credo. I believe in tolerance of the races, of the weak ones, the different, and of those who have climbed higher than myself. As we achieve tolerance, we will automatically achieve the better life, for we will see more of the qualities that are decent, generous, and noble in men, and our faith in the principles of Christ will be easy and natural. Thank you.
Elizabeth Boatwright Coker was inducted into the Hall of Fame in February of 1992. What are you working on now, Mrs. Coker?
Well, I'm working on a book of family tales. I take you to the old family cemetery in Old Edgefield, and I take you by the hand, and we open the wrought iron gate, and then I introduce you to the people in there, beginning with the old Indian fighter, Michael Watson. And then I only introduce you to the ones that are either naughty or funny or have done something really wonderful. And my agent's crazy about it, and if I just finish it, and I think I will in about 2 or 3 months.
Good, we'll look forward to that. Your work, what you've done so far, is such a good blend of fiction, the characters that you make up in your head, and the history of South Carolina.
I love to weave them because they belong together. And they are the same thing. And that's what I'm bringing out in this family book, you see.
I like, in closing, one of the bits of advice you have for young writers, a quote that you have said is, read, 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 and remember what you read.
And also, read, then learn the forms of literature and decide what kind of literature you want to write. If you want to be in the news media, you write a certain way. You get a snappy beginning and get your reader in. But if you must be a writer, you must care about the world in which you live and the people who live in it with you. Find a cause and a commitment. Care about the people. And I said this once to a writing class, I have a belief in your ultimate triumph, if you care enough. Because I care enough, that's why I've become what I have. Develop and cultivate. Make a commitment. Use your mind, but never, never sacrifice your heart.
Elizabeth Boatwright Coker, thank you for sharing your work with us.
I loved it.
From Hartsville, I'm Patty Just.